Across Texas event for 2021. It has been a busy year, and we are incredibly grateful to have you with us. If you're joining us via the platform AirMeet, or if you're live via the live stream, glad to have you here. You are in for a treat with this speaker today. My name is Tammy Wallace, and I am a co-founder and the president and CEO of the Greater Houston LGBT Chamber of Commerce. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I do want to just give an acknowledgement. Today is an important day. It's Veterans Day. And we want to honor and recognize our veterans who have served, who have dedicated much of their career giving back to our country, and especially to our LGBTQ plus veterans. We recognize them. We see you. Many of them served in silence, and we're thankful and grateful for your service. With that, I want to say again, welcome. Today is going to be about not only this amazing speaker with Samantha, but there's great networking. Some of you have been doing that in the early part of the program here. So when we finish up the program, there's going to be plenty of more networking in the Chamber Networking Cafe. So stick around after we finish up the program, and you are going to be able to connect with professionals, business owners across the state of Texas. And actually, we have some people joining us. I saw one from Oklahoma City. We've got our good friend and colleague, Dave Powell from Palm Springs Chamber, LGBT Chamber, joining us. So plenty of folks to network with. And I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our 2021-2022 Pride Across Texas presenting sponsor, Arca Continental Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages. You're going to hear from Renee shortly, but we want to say how much we appreciate Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages for your incredible support, your commitment. They have committed to all four chambers across the state of Texas, and now is our presenting sponsor. And we are just so grateful for your investment in the LGBTQ plus community in our communities and across the state. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Tina Cannon, who is the president and CEO of the Austin LGBT Chamber of Commerce. Tina?
Hello. Thank you very much. I absolutely love getting to spend time with my brilliant counterparts from across the state of Texas. And we have a unique setup in the country, and that Texas is big enough to have our own statewide organization. So you can find us online at the Texas LGBT Chamber of Commerce, which is comprised, of course, of my chamber down in Austin. Or you can visit with, let's see, who's next on there? Is it, I think it's Tammy is next out in Houston. And she's not only the CEO out there, but she also doesn't take enough credit. She's the founder for that organization down there and has been the real lifeblood of that Houston Chamber of Commerce. And then unfortunately, you don't get all the great dad jokes today from Tony Vetta, who has been spearheading the North Texas LGBT Chamber of Commerce for probably, he doesn't want me to say big round numbers, but over a decade up there. But we are joined with his counterpart today, Lisa Howe has been running the ship behind the scenes with him for many years up there as well. And then down just south of me in Austin is the San Antonio LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And we're happy to have Melissa Ochoa, the president of the board for the San Antonio LGBT Chamber of Commerce. It's a great group. Reach out. Visit across city, county lines, make friends across the state, do business across the state. And I think kicking it next, I'm kicking it over to Lisa actually next.
Oh, hey, everybody. Welcome. I'm Lisa Howe. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the vice president of membership and programs at the North Texas LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And yes, Tony Vetta says hello. Sorry he can't be here with us today. He's, serving some leadership and board responsibilities with Visit Dallas. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm always happy to be with our Texas LGBTQ Chambers of Commerce colleagues from Austin, San Antonio, and Houston. There's strength in numbers. And I think that we've shown over this last year with Pride Across Texas and our LGBTBE roundtable and our advocacy work that it brings greater opportunities and greater benefits when our four cities and chambers are working together. So I'm happy to be here and welcome everyone to Pride Across Texas. This is not a competition, but we do want to find out what chambers are represented here and where you guys are from. So I believe there's a poll where you will get to answer. And let's see who's representing today. My slide is still the poll, so I'm not sure if the results are up. So someone could chat or unmute if I need to move on. I was just seeing where everyone was from. And I don't see results. Oh, creator did not share the results. So I'll wait just a second. While I wait, I also want to thank Arca Continental Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages for being our presenting sponsor of Pride of Cross, Texas, and a great partner to all of our chambers in Austin, Houston, North Texas, and San Antonio. And we're happy to have, I'm just waiting to see if that poll comes up. Okay. We're happy to have Renee Downey here to talk to us from Arca Continental Southwest Beverages. And let me tell you more about Renee is the Director of Sales and Operations over Houston and the surrounding cities. Renee has been with Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages for 14 years, originally starting in Lubbock. Renee has been over the Houston area for 2 years now. And during her free time, Renee enjoys listening to live music, watching sports, and enjoying the outdoors, which makes us soul sisters. Renee Downey, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Lisa. And hello, everyone. Arca Continental Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages is a proud sponsor of the LGBTQ Chambers in Texas, and we are happy to be part of this exciting event today. Arca Continental operates in 5 countries, one of which is the U.S., with operations in Texas, Oklahoma, and eastern New Mexico. At Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages, we are on a diversity and inclusion journey, and we have associates attending this event today to continue our learnings. And we thank the Chamber for their partnership in our communities. Now, it's my honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Samantha Smith. She is an award-winning international semifinalist and motivational speaker. Samantha brings a unique and diverse perspective to her audience. Being a former police officer and current volunteer firefighter, her stories are impactful and relatable. She has shared her stories of mental health and the LGBTQ community with thousands of people from around the world. Samantha is a proud lesbian, wife, and mother who was recently named one of the top 28 speakers in the world at the 2021 World Championship of Public Speaking. Let's welcome Samantha Smith.
Unit 2365, please respond to a check on the welfare. Caller advised they've not heard from their boyfriend in some time and they received some concerning messages. Unit 2365, I'll be en route. This was just another day on the job. But today was going to be different. You see, just 2 short weeks prior, I was sitting in the chief's office, signing my resignation letter. I had fallen in love. There were just 2 small hurdles to overcome. 1, I had to move halfway across the country to be with the person I fell in love with. And 2, the person I fell in love with was another woman. You see, this meant I had to come out to my family and tell them something I had known about myself for quite some time. Now, I'm grateful to say, after the shock factor wore off, my family was very accepting. Unfortunately, for my then girlfriend, now wife, she faced a very different scenario. Her father, upon hearing the news that she was with me, another woman, sent her a text message that would shatter her world and enrage me. That text message read, "If we were back in Russia, I would chop you up and feed you to the pigs." Unit 2365, I'm on scene for the last call I'd ever take at that department. My partner and I arrived to a 3-story complex, and we were immediately met by the caller, who was a bit frantic, explaining they hadn't heard from their boyfriend in some time. A neighbor stepped out who actually knew the caller, so they went ahead to sit with them while we went forward to investigate. We approached the door and we looked around, but we couldn't really see anything. We knocked loudly, but there was no answer. Based on the circumstances, we were given permission to go ahead and make entry. I positioned myself in front of the door with my partner directly behind me. I drew my service weapon and I dropped my shoulder, busting and yelling, "Police! Police!" I was immediately looking in a living room. My partner advanced forward. I turned once behind him and once again as I was staring down a hallway when I heard the sound, click. In law enforcement, click is a good sound. It means my partner holstered his weapon. There was no longer a threat. So I went ahead and holstered my own. I was about to exit out of the apartment when I heard him say, "Hey, come in here." I took a few steps forward and I found myself in the doorway of the master bedroom. It was dark, but there was just enough light peeking through the window when I saw the body. A young man was laying in the bed. He had a bag over his head with duct tape around the neck and a tube slithered under the tape. That tube was connected to a tank on the floor. That young man was deceased by suicide. Unit 2365, roll medics to my location. We have an apparent suicide. I had been a cop for about 4 years at this time, and I'm grateful to say I had never actually found somebody deceased on a suicide call. But this was a crime scene. So as my partner and I began to exit out, I found myself back in that living room I originally entered into. A piece of paper caught my eye on the coffee table. I went over to it and I began to read what appeared to be a suicide note. That young man described how life in general was just stressful. Everything from work and friends and family. And then it hit me. You remember that caller, that frantic caller who was so concerned about their boyfriend? That caller was a man. And this young man went on to describe that he took his life because his family rejected him for being gay. It could have easily been my wife writing her own suicide letter for the rejection she would face simply for living authentically and loving me. You know, my wife and I, we faced many moments of discrimination over the years, everything from awkward stares and verbal arguments to even the need for a protective order for ourselves and our children. And it is 2021, and we've come a long way since the Stonewall riots in 1969, but we have a long way to go. My wife and I, we share 3 beautiful children together. Our youngest 11-year-old son, he described to me one day as I stood there proudly at the bus stop that he got into a verbal argument with another student. You see, this student told him that couldn't be me, his mother, standing there. No, that must be his father, maybe his brother, an uncle, or a friend, or simply just any other man. All because I have short hair? Our 17-year-old son, he should never be worried about going to high school and facing a bully just because he's proud to be a young gay teenager. No person. No person should ever face judgment or ridicule for who they love or how they identify. So I stand here. I stand here in vulnerability. And I stand here in courage. And I implore you all to push past the hate, let go of the judgment, and simply just love one another, because someone's life depends on it. You see that young man who laid in that bed with that bag over his head and the tape around his neck, his life depended on it. My own wife whose father sent her a text message and said he'd rather see her chopped up and fed to the pigs, her life depends on it. And it could be anyone. Your own mother, father, brother, sister, friend, colleague, or even your own child whose life depends on it. Unit 2365, I'll be 10-7 for the last time. Thank you, Tammy.
Sam, thank you. So yes, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that story. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to put those in the Q&A. Sam is happy to answer any questions. She will also be out in the Chamber Networking Cafe to connect with folks. Sam, I just, and I have a question. I want to know, I mean, Toastmasters taking this speech to the highest levels of an organization in terms of speech making. What was that like for you?
Yeah, that was quite a process. So thank you for the question. I appreciate it. I'd love to give you a little background. So when I actually did this speech, it was in one of my pathways, which is within Toastmasters. And a colleague of mine said, you have to take this to competition. And I looked at them like they were crazy. And I said, there's no way that I am going to give a speech of this level, of this emotional capacity that I'd have to bring. I'm just not going to do it. It's not going to be received well. And they pushed me and they pushed me. And fast forward, I finally said, okay, I'll give the speech. And I went through the levels and I kept rising. And honestly, I was surprised every time they called my name. There was about 8 different levels. And I got to the semifinal round. And bear in mind that at the international contest at the semifinal round, the judges can be from anywhere. So, right, a judge can be from a country where it's literally okay to be killed for being gay. And that's where we hit the wall. And all of my coaches and mentors told me there may be a day that we hit that wall where people are just not ready to hear this speech. And unfortunately, we hit that at the semifinal round, but that catapulted such an outreach. I received emails and messages and phone calls from people all over the world telling me how this empowered them to be able to come out, how they now see things a little bit differently. And if that was all I could do in one person, then I did my job, right? I feel like I met that level that I needed to, but it has gone even further. A little insight, I've actually challenged Toastmasters, which I'm grateful to say I received positive feedback, because on the Judges Code of Ethics, they state that judges cannot be biased against certain things: age, sex, race. Unfortunately, there's 2 things missing: gendered identity and sexual orientation. And so they're meeting in November, actually, as we speak, to add that language. Hopefully, they're bringing it up on behalf of the letter I wrote, and hopefully that language will be added. And so no person can ever feel again that whether they advance or not, they know it's because of their speech, not because of how they look or what they're speaking about, because most of the topics are very cookie cutter motivational, which is fine and great. But I wanted to bring something powerful, and I think I did that, and I achieved it. And the outreach has been amazing, and it was an amazing opportunity. And I truly, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to get to share with you all and all the folks that I've had the chance to share with.
Well, so I know, so we've got people listening through the live stream, and, all the chambers have cross-posted, and that's wonderful, because we want your story to be shared. But I know, just from when I first heard your story, it was life-altering for me, in the sense of seeing this from this law enforcement lens, what you experienced. You must have people reaching out to you and just saying, like, I know you mentioned with Toastmasters, but now your speaking engagements have gone further, you must have people reaching out saying, this is life-changing for me, giving me hope, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big thing that just happened actually in the last 2 weeks is I just got signed on with the College Agency, which is one of the top 3 agencies that book performances for universities across the US. And they booked me on for a 1-hour program where I share the story as well as incorporate some other factors there. And so bringing it to our younger adults, when they're in college and they're trying to figure out themselves, bringing a story that's impactful, right? And I like to say that, hopefully I'll keep my my young looks for time to go, and I'll still be received well when I go talk to the universities. But I'm excited to get out there and be able to talk to students, right? Because they're in that age where they're trying to figure things out, and to let them know that it's okay, right? It's okay to be different. It's okay to have mental health, questions and concerns and things like that, and to open that conversation up with them, not only from the background of a law enforcement or as a first responder, but also as somebody who's a part of the community and is proud to be a part of it. And so it's really opening up that dialogue. So it's been amazing. The outreach has been amazing. The opportunities have been amazing, not only with you all. I've had many other speaking engagements that I've been requested for. So it's truly been, I've been blindsided, but all in such an amazing way. So I'm beyond grateful.
As we like to say at the chamber, it's all good, right? It's all good.
It is all good, yes, ma'am.
And that's a great lead into a question Robin has. She wants to know if the Toastmasters speech is online. She would love to share it with her colleagues.
Absolutely. So anybody can visit my website. My website also links to all of my social media accounts, but it is the speech is directly on my website, and I'm sure you guys can put it in the chat, but it is www.Samantha Smith Official. Thank you, Maureen, for throwing that up there. You go to my website, my speech is right there. If you scroll down just to the middle, you'll see this speech recorded prior, and you feel free to share. I would absolutely love it. Please feel free to connect with me. Let me know if the speech did anything for you. I love all the feedback. I'm always open to that.
So Sam, when you were responding to my first question, it struck me. A number of years ago, I was very involved in the fight around marriage equality. Early on, when that broke on the ground, knocking on doors, we were asking people what they thought about this, and what I knew at that point, and all of those in the work we're talking about, sharing our stories. It's one of the best things that we can do. And what we saw with marriage equality becoming such a national conversation is that people began to share their stories to moms, to dads, to siblings. And it started to change, and people became less about, we don't talk about that, to this is my child, this is my sibling, talk about this power of storytelling and how you see it through your lens.
Yeah. So I think that, when I've done this speech a few times, a question that has come up that is relating and kind of triggers me as you're speaking about this is, how did you have the courage to bring this story forth, right? This is obviously a very personal story. And people are like, oh, you're so confident. You're just up there saying it. And I give them the insight, and I'll share that with you, which is when I first wrote this speech, the first time I performed it for myself in practice, I didn't make it through the speech. I broke. Right. I got about a quarter of the way through, and the emotions took over and the tears welled, and I had to step away. And it took me a little bit, and I did it again, and I got a little bit further, and I got a little bit further. And it took me, I'd say, about 10 times before I was able to actually make it all the way through the speech without emotionally breaking. And so I say to those folks, it's not that I'm confident in giving the speech. It's that I've done it so many times that although the emotions still come through, I've learned how to compartmentalize them so that I can share the story. And so when I talked to the specific person who asked me that question, she was referencing a story that she wanted to tell. So to answer your question, this is what I told her. I said, you have to be willing to be vulnerable in order to be courageous so that our stories can be heard. And it's kind of like my tagline, but I believe in it so wholeheartedly that if we're not willing to step out, and when I say that with in all regard to safety, right? I don't want anybody to ever tell a story that puts them in an unsafe position. And I put on my cop hat there for a second. Safety has to be number one. And I understand that sometimes it's not safe. I'm grateful to say that I'm in a position where I feel safe to be able to tell my story. But safety aside, if safety is there and we're good, we have to be willing to be vulnerable to tell the story, because there's so many folks that just don't understand. And that's the outreach I received, is that people reached out and said, I had no idea. I didn't know this was happening. I had no idea that this was an issue. I'm from up north. I'm from New York originally. I've been in Texas for about 7 years now. And so many people ask me, how do you like Texas? How is it different? How does that work? And I said, Texas is amazing, except when I have to deal with the nonsense because of how I look, right? Because when I have to get chased into bathrooms, when I have to get into arguments with people that I want to go in the women's fitting room, not the male fitting room. And so when I look at all of that, I tell people, if we're not willing to stand up, if we're not willing to educate in a safe environment, then we're doing a disservice. And so I really took it upon myself. Obviously, it's within me to serve, right? I used to be a cop. I volunteer as a firefighter, and I always wanted to affect positive change. As cliche as it sounds, that's who I was. But when I thought about being able to give a speech of this level with this much emotion involved and really speaking about the truth that so many don't know, this is where the opportunity is to affect that positive change, right? As a firefighter, I can only affect change in my community that I serve. As a cop, I could only affect in the community I serve. Here, it's broad, it's open, right? It's broad.
Yeah.
So that opportunity to tell that story, and all I hope is that it influences other folks to be willing to tell theirs, because I'm not the only story, right? I'm just a mouth that's willing to tell a story, right? I incorporate my experience I incorporate my wife, Olga, and what she experienced. And that's just, right? That's just a little bit of it. And I know the stories are out there because people have told me them. And so I hope that it just influences others to be able to tell their story, because if we're not telling our stories, we're not being heard. And then we don't have the opportunity to educate and try and move forward to where things get better for all of us.
It is truly that the underscore power of storytelling. And,
Yes.
and with that, Frederick says, thanks so much for being a brave, vulnerable face for the community, Sam. I am Out Youth's Advocacy and Education Manager, and I am wondering what advice you have for LGBTQIA2+ youth in Texas schools, given everything they're going through.
Yeah. So thank you, Frederick. That is quite a question. And as I said in my speech, we have a 17-year-old who came out to us 2 years ago. And that's a dynamic we're trying to work through. I would say that the most important thing is, if there is a supportive person in their life, whether that's a family member or a friend, or maybe it's a colleague or a parent's friend, or if there's somebody who is supportive, it's about connecting that youth with organizations and groups that can give them the support they need. Because the overwhelming feeling from what I've received feedback on is that they feel alone. They feel like they're the odd person out. They're the only person in school who's gay or who's trans or who's lesbian, or any of the other feelings there that they might have. They don't understand them, and they're trying to work through that. And so what I say, number one, is they have to figure out a way to connect. And I know that some schools have programs, and not all in Texas, I understand that, but I do know schools are moving towards that. And I hope that in doing things like this, and in our chambers and other organizations that are out there that are pushing for that, we can get that statewide. But ultimately, they have to be in a position where they can find that support, because without that support, they feel alone. And when they feel alone, that's when those thoughts overwhelm. And unfortunately, that's when devastation occurs. And so linking them up, connecting them with organizations and groups that can validate what they're feeling, that can hear what they're feeling, and that can truly be a beacon of support for them. And I say that there are organizations out there, and I would be happy, Frederick, to talk to you, off the side here when we connect later on, and we can maybe talk through some of those organizations, because I know there's some out there that I've worked with and that I've connected with, and I'd be happy to give you that information as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here, but if anybody else has any questions, kind of last opportunity here, Sam is going to be out in the Cafe Networking Lounge, as I mentioned, at one of the tables. Sam, I want to say thank you for your vulnerability, your authenticity. When you and I first talked, and we've known each other for a while, but we reconnected. And I just remember feeling so energized during that conversation. And I'm a strong believer in storytelling, and we all have stories to tell in our communities. Unfortunately, so many of those stories are painful, but when we can bring those to the surface and tell those, where we're in a comfortable and safe space, as you mentioned, I do think it changes lives. And I often bring up, we think about coming out. Most people don't even think about it from an LGBTQ business owner's lens, but there's a whole coming out process as LGBTQ owned businesses. We may be out in our personal lives, but we still have another layer. Are we going to lose clients, right? Are we going to suffer repercussions? So I think the operative word there is hope. And I think your story is what we're hearing today is hope, and generates that, and particularly for this younger generation, that there's hope on the other side.
Yes,
so parting words from you.
So Tammy, I just want to express my gratitude to you, to the chambers across the state for the opportunity to share this story. All we can do is keep sharing our stories, right? And so I implore everybody has a story. You mentioned coming out. We come out all the time. Every time I give this speech, I'm coming out. Every time I walk into a bathroom and somebody gives me that weird side eye, I'm coming out. As businesses, we had a photography business. I had to come out every single time, and the concern of what's somebody going to say. And so the more that we can do that, the more that we can be vulnerable in a safe space, hopefully we can get to that one day where we don't have to come out anymore, right? Where it's just okay to be who we are without having to come out. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to share the story. I appreciate everybody who joined today and listened. I look forward to connecting with everybody once we finish up the program here. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam. It is an honor, and it has been a privilege to have you with us and hear your story. And again, Sam will be out in the Chamber Networking Cafe. With that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Melissa Ochoa, who's the board president with the San Antonio LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and she's closed us out for this afternoon, and we'll get back to networking.
All right. Thank you, Tammy. As Tammy said, I am Melissa Ochoa with the LGBT Chamber of Commerce here in San Antonio. Thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, Sam. That was incredible. And again, as Tammy said, thank you for your vulnerability as well. We appreciate you sharing your vulnerable and authentic story with us today. Sam will be, again, as mentioned, she will be in the Chamber Networking Cafe. So if you'd like to connect, join her at that table. And then as we wrap up this afternoon, a quick reminder that the Chamber Networking Cafe will be open. Tammy, are we still going to keep that up till 4:30?
It will be up until 4:30.
Okay.
As long as people are in there, we will keep it up. You bet.
Okay, so that's great. So you've got 45 minutes to continue networking in the cafe. So it's a great opportunity to make lots of connections, make connections across the state of Texas and out of the state as well. As we heard earlier, we've got individuals that are out of the state of Texas as well that have joined us today. Speaking of connecting, if you're not a member of your local chamber, now is a great time to join as well. So you can reach out to any one of your chambers, local chambers in Dallas, Houston, Austin, and of course me here in San Antonio. Thank you again to our 2021-22 Pride Across Texas presenting sponsor, Arca Continental Southwest Beverages. We appreciate you. And Renee will be in the Chamber Networking Cafe as well and drop by her table to say hello as well. So we're glad you were able to join us. We look forward to seeing you in early 2022 for the next Pride Across Texas. And until then, please be safe and well.